I was just telling our new relative and friend, Gina, here, that we were talking about somewhat is going to be thematic in today's talk. And I hope that you can very easily and very quickly spot the point and purpose of the manner in which I'm trying to present this talk today, which today, after all, is Easter Sunday. And the first of 2 days of any given year, where for the most part, the whole world stops for 24 hours, followed, of course, by Christmas. Businesses and stores, supermarkets, pretty much closed all day. In fact, most of everything is closed today, with, of course, the exception of churches. And they are at full seat capacity this morning. When I was in the United Methodist Church, I have to confess I was a little bit of a, if I could say it, smart ass at times. And 2 of those times were at Easter and Christmas, because there were always a certain group of people that are going to show up on Christmas till the place is overflowing, and then won't see them again until next Easter. Or they come for Easter and I won't see them again until next Christmas. So, in my way, I began to speak to some of these folks after the service, and I'd say, well, Merry Christmas. I said, what? It's just Easter? I said, I know that, but I won't see you again until Christmas. But it's a day when the entire Christian faith globally pauses to celebrate and remember the resurrection of a man they call Jesus. I'm confident we're all familiar with the story. As we were speaking, Gina, we grew up in the traditional church, and I'm sure that most and many of you have had your own experience in the traditional church. We're all familiar with the story. 3 days earlier, what we now know is Good Friday, a man was nailed to a cross, and his body draped in traditional burial clothing, and the tomb was sealed in stone. The day ended in deep grief and sadness and sorrow among his friends and his family, most notably his mother Mary. 3 days later, his friends and relatives went to the tomb, only to discover that the stone had been rolled away. In time, soon, it is reported that he appeared before them in living form. Word spread rapidly. Jesus had been raised from the dead. Some believed, others did not. Thomas, one of his disciples, commonly known as Doubting Thomas, could not accept the news and demanded, unless I can see the nail marks in his hands, I will not believe. Well, it only took the appearance of the man Jesus to convince him otherwise. And hence that conviction established a precedent on which an entire world religion would be spawned. And mind you, when I stood in the traditional pulpit, I was taught intentionally to look for our differences. with the intention and with the purpose of change and conversion, as was the way of our colonial ancestors. If we can't change you, convert you, then we will remove you. Problem solved. In those days, in the traditional church, Easter sermons were a relatively easy rite and easier delivery. But when I stepped away from the doctrine and the dogma and what I labeled the pressure to produce converts, my whole paradigm of things shifted and changed. I looked at people in a different way, and I saw people in a different way. And for the first time in my ministerial career, I was able to look through and beyond the differences, where I discovered the sacred intimateness of our similarities. Our differences are things over which we fight and argue, drop bombs upon one and each other. But our similarities are those things that connect us all. Oh, metakue oyasan. We're all connected in the sacred web of life. Our similarities are where we find the true value and purpose of fellowship and community. It is that space in which we connect with people in a good way and embrace the divine spirit that lives with and among all people and all religions and all nations. But as I sit in this chair today, Easter talks are a bit more challenging. But in many ways, the Judeo-Christian story is not unlike the story of our North American native ancestors and relatives. As ours, too, is a story of persecution, prosecution, and death, and prophecies of a resurrected people and their living again resurgence. Do you see some similarities between the two stories there? It is where we find and discover our similarities, and there are many across all religions, and our sacred connection and acceptance of our alleged differences, and enable us to step in to a new freedom, a new paradigm, a new way of seeing one another, which focuses and embraces our similarities and looks beyond whatever we perceive our differences to be. That's the heart of this church, the heart of our fellowship, the heart of our community. I'll tell you another story. Born around 1856, a Paiute prophet was born in the Smith Valley area, southeast of Carson City, Nevada. His name was Wovoka. One of Wovoka's chief sources of authority among the Paiutes was his alleged ability to control the weather. He was said once to cause a block of ice to fall from the sky on a summer day, to be able to end drought with rain or snow, to light his pipe with the sun, and to form icicles in his hands. Wovoka also claimed to have a rather prophetic vision after falling into a trance during the solar eclipse of 1889. Wovoka's vision insisted that God, the Great Spirit, had informed him of great changes coming within just 2 years. The ancestors of his Paiute people would rise from the dead. Any similarity there between the stories? That the buffalo would once again fill the plains and the white colonizers would vanish. Wovoka also reported to his people that God had provided him the instructions for ensuring these events. Indians were to remain peaceful, profess their faith in the resurrection of the dead by taking part in a ritual dance called the ghost dance. Like Jesus, Wovoka's following increased quickly, and the people's belief in his prophecies spread to other tribes, most notably the Sioux. And the religious frenzy embedded and embodied in the ghost dance, that frenzy engendered and frightened American immigrants, settlers, particularly in the Dakotas. Sadly, and counterintuitive to the hope and promise of the prophecy, the movement ended with tragedy on the Pine Ridge Reservation, where over 200 Sioux were massacred and murdered at a place we call Wounded Knee. All based on the presumption of how we are different. How your God is different from our God, or my God. We were very much aware that there were, other tribes that were our neighbors, and sure, sometimes we were in fights with each other and in wars with each other. I think that's just the human nature of the way things are. But it's sure been going on for a long time, hasn't it? Another prophecy from our people, one that remains with hope and promise to this very day. Of course, that's the seventh generation prophecy of Crazy Horse. We know it well. It is the foundation upon which our seventh generation fellowship is founded and grounded. Like the Easter story and the Easter message, it too is a prophecy, a promise of hope, of redemption, of renewal, and in its own way, the resurrection itself. But not only a resurrection of a man, the resurrection of an entire nation and race, but also, note this, to all colors of humankind. And by that very statement, we have to place our prejudices into the fire, because they no longer have value. One of the things that I struggled most with in the traditional church was this concept of a one way, only way. to heaven. That somehow just couldn't coexist in my spirit, you know? But anyway, I'm not speaking negatively about that. But the prophecy, of course, we know is that upon suffering beyond suffering, the red nation will what? Rise again. Upon suffering beyond suffering, the red nation will rise again. And it will be a blessing to a sick and a broken world, a world filled with broken promises, a world filled with selfishness and separation. Notice our differences. We'll bring this to a generation of people, a world longing for the light again. He said, I see a time of 7 generations when all of the colors of mankind will gather under the sacred tree of life, and the whole earth will become one again. Not this religion or that religion or this race or that race, but to all the colors of humankind. And then the world will become one again. And that day there will be those among our people who will carry knowledge and understanding of unity among all living things. And the young ones will come to those of my people and ask for this wisdom. He finished by saying, I salute the light that is in your eyes. For when you are at that center within you, and I am at that center within me, our similarities, then we shall be as one. Like the Easter story, our prophets and prophecies also align in agreement with regards to renewal, regeneration, redemption, restoration, and reconciliation. But regardless of your individual and personal religious beliefs, the Easter season reminds us that in the realm of spirit, all things are being born again. That which is old, that which no longer serves us in an efficacious manner in our lives, those things which no longer serve us very well, nor in a healthy manner, be that mentally, spiritually, or physically, they no longer have any reign or any power over us. Grief, sadness, presumed failures, broken hearts, disappointments, betrayals, broken relationships, personal hardships, whatever the injury or the injustice of the arrows which have inflicted and infected our souls, they just no longer have power over you. This is a season of dismissal of those elements and objects and people in our lives, and in the sunrise, everything is being made new again. It's indeed a season, a time of and for resurrection and revival and restoration, at least and especially as regards our spiritual life. For me, no experience has been as much of a poignant demonstration and expression of this message of rebirth than the Muscogee way of ceremony at what we call Arbor and Berry Busk. Busk means to dance. This is coming up on our southeastern Muscogee Nation reservation next Saturday. It's a ceremony that typically and traditionally coincides and aligns in a theological way of Easter's significance. At this ceremony, one which marks the beginning of our new year, the willow branches, which have covered the square ground arbors for the previous year, are removed. They covered the arbors in a good way for a year. Now is time for regeneration, new birth. Behold, all things are becoming new again. So we remove the old and dried up willow branches which we placed upon the arbors last year and replace the covering with new, fresh green, respectfully harvested, carefully gathered, vibrant green branches and leaves of willow. Even the ashes from last year's sacred fire are removed and placed upon the ash pile, which holds the ashes of years of ceremony and from generational past ceremonial fires. Weeds and debris are cleared and cleaned from within the dance circle. New logs are placed in the center mound, and a new fire is lit. One which empowers and embraces the precept of all things new. But what it demonstrates to the people is a sense of renewal and rebirth. That which is old is now being made new again. And the implications of such a profound impact on the celebrants is quite powerful. It has been a powerful experience for me to surrender, to let go, to put what needs to be placed into the fire, and be born again. To be born again in and through the eyes of Creator. To me, that ceremony was and continues to be a penultimate expression and sign and symbol of death and resurrection and new birth. See, if we really think about it and seek to find our similarities within our stories and our traditions and our history, one could argue that today then is the resurrection day of our own spirits rising from the dead, awakening from a long season of spiritual slumber, elevating our consciousness and raising our vibration and ascend to new heights and new levels of enlightenment and spiritual growth and maturity. You see, some things have to die in order to be born again. But like the phoenix rising from the ashes, so it is often necessary for us to dismiss the charred chaff, the ashes, and burn away the gravity that holds us down and holds us back and has done so for too long now. If we are to ascend to a higher level of spiritual consciousness and enlightenment, we really just have to bury that which has been holding us back and has restrained it and restricted our spiritual growth. That is the promise and power of Easter. Behold, my relatives, we have been set free. Set free from the bonds and the arrows of this world and the dark entities and powers in the spirit realm. The heavy stone of entombment has been rolled away, and the grave of yesterday emptied, and we rise again, born anew, beginning again as changed and transformed spiritual beings with changed hearts, changed eyes, and changed minds. We listen and we hear. And we hear that still small voice of the Creator saying yes to this promise. And we are able to accept the grace and the generosity of Creator and the universe in which was created by His own hands. We stand and we rise again. Aho. And really, I think when we think about it, and think about our similarities more so than our differences, just makes sense, doesn't it? Its own way, it just makes sense. It removes, as I said earlier, the prejudice from our eyes. We no longer see this person over here as a yellow man or this person over here as a black man. All of those filters are removed, and we see one another as the human and divine spirit that we all are. Tom and I were conversing last night. We were talking about the ceremony that's coming up in Hartwell soon. And I kind of laughed. Many of you have met Robert Pullen, my dear friend from the southeastern Muscogee Nation. He was here several weeks ago. When I began to tell him things like, he always asks when we talk, how's the church? How's your work going? And when I told him about this event in Hartwell at the center of the world, which we'll be participating in, it changes the way we perceive one another. How can I look at a man of a different religion or a woman of a different race and form any judgmental opinions about that? That's contrary to the way of the good red road. Because our way and our road sees beyond all of those differences. And our eyes are open to see our similarities. And that is a beautiful thing when that happens. You know, we don't always have to agree on everything. But at the end of the day, there's no reason that we should get mad and be angry at people just because they're this or they're that, or they go to this church or that church, or believe this or believe that. It's the true spirit and embracing of the O Metakue Oyasam, again, which means that in this sacred web of life in which we live, in which we exist, the primary focus is not on, oh, you're this or you're that, or I can't sit with you because you are this. You know, it's just a place where we open our hearts and our spirit to to take the time and make the effort to listen with open ears, ears that are opened by spirit and not prejudice. And then we can be able to live in that final dimension of the seven sacred teachings, which is love, true love, as it was created and intended to be in the beginning. And so may it be with us, especially on this day. So we come now to our time at the altar. My balance is getting a little bit better, but I still have to kind of steady myself along the way. But most all of us are familiar. I think, Hope, maybe last week you were introduced to the altar and how we use the various sacraments that are here to make and offer a new prayer with Creator. But for purposes of, I'm not seeing the lighter. It's where? Oh, okay, good. I've spoken of and mentioned today that some things we need to place into the fire and let it go. Surrender, be free from it, let it go. Especially in foremost our perception of our differences. And we begin, if we notice, we don't have a fire in here, but I've got a coal, charcoal coal. This is the tobacco. And we have sage, sweetgrass, and cedar on the altar, all of which are very sacred elements and sacraments to the Native American people. So if you think conceptually, our altar has a certain movement to it. Tobacco, which was a gift that was brought to our people many generations ago by a white buffalo calf, is seen as a vessel or a vehicle between our hearts and our words and our prayers to the heart and ears and eyes of Creator. But we first must begin with clean hands. And with that, we use sacred floral water, fragrance, and essence just flows through us and connects us to the breath and beauty of Mother Earth. Once our hands are clean, then we can take the tobacco and be conscientious of that which we are placing into the fire. And then we move with hope, which is another thing that this day embraces, acknowledges hope, to begin to make a new prayer for ourselves and for the people. We use the scarlet cloth and a pinch of tobacco in which we breathe and make our prayer. We do it in a prayer time. Everyone's looks different, but this is kind of the way mine usually end up looking. I'll have to tie it when I sit down. That's too much for me to try to balance in one time right now. But all of the sacraments are here, and you come to the altar and just become conscious of where you are and what your heart is speaking to you. And use these tools to make your good prayer. And when you're finished with your prayer time, we place them there in the little basket. And then in another significant way, celebrating spring and Easter, we come to the spring equinox, which we just did few weeks ago. And all of the prayer ties that have been left by the people for a year are placed into a big bonfire. And that's quite a powerful moment, because when we begin to offer the prayer ties, there's just a white smoke that just kind of swirls and vortexes itself up, and you can physically see that our prayers are on the way.